Hello, everybody. Welcome to the latest episode of The Jew and the Gentile. I'm Pastor Samuel, and this is Jesse Reckelberg, one of our amazing elders. And he's actually more Jewish than me.
To some extent.
To some extent. I have the look. He has the jeans. Literally, he's wearing jeans. I'm not. Yeah, I'm in shorts, man. It's
in April.
For this week, it is summer.
Right.
It's going to be 81 degrees today.
Yeah, but 44 on Sunday.
I know, it's crazy. It's like, what's happening?
Wisconsin.
So last week, we started the subject. It is very vast in its consequences and its knowledge and lack thereof. We talked about self-love. And within that subject of self-love, there is always going to come boundaries.
Ooh.
And the scary word boundaries.
Scary word.
And so we wanted to focus a little bit more on what that means, because literally no one knows how to do that really well. It's a very rare thing that somebody actually has this down pretty well. And the world has no idea what it is. Actually, I was just thinking as I walked out for a few seconds for a call of nature, that the world has no idea, and they actually kind of vilify boundaries. A lot of the world does.
Right.
And then you got like this weird segment of like self-love psychologist people who for the most part have a pretty good understanding, but then the people who are listening to it, because they're just getting to know what that means, they're like overcompensating for lack of it.
Right.
And they're immature in their communication of it. So, and then you got the church who's mixed all up in that, and they think, oh, Jesus didn't have any boundaries, and we just gotta love everybody.
Right.
And which honestly is pretty similar to the world, right? Because you got people on one end of the spectrum, we'll just say the far left, who are like, there's no borders, right? Which is another word for boundaries, right? And it's like, we gotta love everybody, you gotta let everybody in, and it's like, well,
that includes the drug dealers.
Yeah, I don't know if that's
the murderers.
true. It's like, well, and then they also, those people love to use Jesus as a reason. It's like, you gotta love everybody. Like, God doesn't have, boundaries. There's no need for nations anymore. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. Did you read the Bible where it said all the nations will come to him?
Right.
So that inevitably tells me, well, that there are boundaries.
And that will never happen anyways.
Right. That there's no boundaries.
Yes.
There's no borders. Like, there has to be borders.
Yes. And obviously, when you look in the Old Testament, they set up stones, they set up markers, they set up boundaries to, say, hey, this is where I live, this is where you live.
Yeah.
It's all good. It wasn't this great big fence, but we'll get to that later. But there were markers.
Yeah, and markers to set up sacred places.
Yes.
Like, the temple had 3 layers, right? You brought that up last time. There's 3 layers to this temple that they made.
Right.
Even the tabernacle. And there was boundaries that a lot of people couldn't get to. They couldn't get to the Holy of Holies.
Right.
For a very good reason, because you would die.
Right.
In the presence of the Lord if you weren't actually supposed to be there. Wow. God has boundaries.
No way.
So, yeah, let's talk about that. Kind of just broadly painted a picture of what that is. So how do we do this? What does that mean? What does boundaries actually mean? And how do we do that well?
Yeah. Well, I think the first thing is you have to look at the way the world views boundaries. And like you said, I think there's 2 extremes.
Yeah.
I think you used the border, and that was actually a beautiful picture. The border wall, which is not to get political, but
China's gonna pay for it.
China.
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 Oh wait, no, that's not that. Mexico. Mexico's gonna pay for it.
Right.
It's gonna be fantastic. And you know what? Canada's gonna pay for another one just because it's so beautiful. They're
Right.
gonna want one.
Yes, exactly. So, I mean, what does that look like? So you have the two extremes. So I think,
Yeah.
one of the first things we look at is the one extreme.
Right.
The love everyone.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a beautiful thing when you say you want to love everyone.
Right.
It really is.
Yes.
But what do you think that looks like?
Well, so I think the perception is a lot of times with that camp is that boundaries are evil.
Right.
And they have evil intent.
Mm-hmm.
And boundaries have consequences that are bad.
Mm-hmm.
But in actuality, when you do boundaries in a healthy way, when they're not walls and they're gates, they're actually ways to interact and get
Right.
be invited into someone's life.
Right.
But they're gates in order that people that are not invited don't get in,
Right.
because there are people you don't want around in your house, in your
Absolutely.
in your being, in your soul, because they're dangerous.
Right.
So there's that. I think that utopian idea that like all humans are naturally good,
Mm-hmm.
which actually, I mean, goes against the Bible in general.
It's pretty obvious it's not real anyway.
Yeah, it's pretty obvious. So when people say, "Oh, we need to love everybody," there's actually a misperception of what love is.
Yes.
There's a wrong definition of what love is. Love doesn't actually mean that everyone gets to come into my house and eat my food and like be with my kids and interact with my wife.
Right.
Like that's not what love is. Love protects as well. That's so if you're just a random stranger and you want to come into my house, that automatically, because you're wanting to disregard a boundary, that actually sends a signal to me and everybody in my house that you are dangerous.
Right. Yeah.
So people who want to violate boundaries and violate those natural human tendencies.
Right.
Like you said, you can read it in the Bible, in the Old Testament. They set up markers, they set up boundaries, not to have like conflict with somebody, but just to know that this is my responsibility. That's your responsibility over
Right.
there. This is my stuff, and that's your stuff. And then that way we can interact well, because your stuff and my stuff aren't getting in the way
Right.
of our relationship. A great Abraham and his nephew, Lot.
Yeah.
They were getting too prosperous. Talking about money.
Right.
They were getting too prosperous, and their shepherds were getting in arguments because their flocks were interacting, and they didn't have enough water for everybody, enough food,
Yep.
resources. So they said, you know what? Hey, because we love each other and we want to have a good relationship, you pick which direction to go into, and I'll choose the other one. And so to protect the relationship, they actually parted ways so that their property and their people wouldn't have a conflict.
Right. And you think about that too. He followed him.
Yeah.
The whole way. Lot followed him all the way to that whole area.
Yeah.
Before they actually parted ways.
Yeah. Right. So and then Abraham went to save him. So it wasn't
Right.
like that broke their relationship.
No, it actually helped.
It helped their relationship. Abraham and his 300 dudes,
Right.
they strapped up and were like, let's go.
Uh-huh.
And they went into this place to save him from being a POW, basically.
Pretty much.
And they did it.
Right.
I think that's one of the coolest stories.
It is. That's one of my favorite stories, actually.
What? I'm like, Abraham was he's so ready.
Yes.
He's got 300 dudes ready to roll. Like, what? Okay.
Yeah.
And so when we say we need to love all people, a lot of times those people are the most unprepared to actually do that.
Right. another analogy too, as far as love is concerned. So, um, let's say a marriage. So you're married to your wife, but
Yeah.
you don't allow your 14-year-old son to sleep in the same bed.
No.
Because there is a boundary.
Yeah.
There is a place where, but it doesn't say that you don't love that person. But it's a different.
Yeah.
It's a different love. It's a different aspect of it.
Right.
So when you say love everyone, yes, you can love someone, but there are specific ways to set up good boundaries.
Yeah, there's actually different ways you express that love and different basically circles
Right.
of that inner court.
Right.
Right. And your wife is at
Yes.
to that core.
Right.
God should be the core. Your wife is the second one, right?
Yeah.
But so when people say that, I think for the most part, it's because it has a good intention, but it has so much ignorance to it.
Right.
Has so much ignorance to it, and a lot of other motivations too. Mm-hmm. Like most of the people who say that are users, in my opinion, users of people.
Yes.
And so
I agree.
They're either wanting everybody else to cater to their needs, or they have, honestly, for the most part, the majority of people who say that have political motivations.
Yes.
Or they're using people.
Right.
And you see that all the time in church, right? It's like, oh, you don't care about me, and oh, you're not going to drop everything just because I called you to come help me. No, I'm not.
No.
Because yes, you are a part of the family of Christ, but my responsibility is to my family. I'm not going to leave my house at 12 a.m.
Right.
because you're having a bad night. Like if it's really a big problem, it'll still be there tomorrow. Let's talk about that then. Right?
Exactly.
So, the majority of people who say, "Oh, we need to love all people," they don't actually do that.
No.
Themselves. They want other people to do it.
They want them to love them.
Yes. They're wanting people to love them.
Like, love me.
Yes.
But I don't have to do that.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
Great example is like, it's political because it's a great example. But like the governor of Texas busing a bunch of illegal immigrants up to the rich part of, I can't remember, the East Coast where all the rich politicians live.
Yeah.
And then they literally the next day send them somewhere else.
Right.
But they're all the people who said they should be here. We should give them this, give them that.
Mm-hmm.
So they're saying what they want to say for an agenda, but they're not prepared to love them the way they say love should be.
Right. Another example, and that's a great example.
Yeah.
Another example would be the coexist
Yes.
stickers. I love to see those because to me they make me laugh. But they have all the different symbols on there, including the cross.
Yeah.
But typically those people are the ones that have the biggest problem with Christians.
Right. Yep.
And it's okay. So if that's what you're saying, then that incorporates everyone.
Right.
And yeah, interesting.
Yeah. So we need to actually be able to define those things really well. And for the most part, the world and the church, the church has a little bit better definition of what love should be, but we don't. The world has actually, through osmosis, been seeping in about what love is. And so we actually, as Christians, need to take a really good look at what that looks like and define it through what God says. Because there's a lot of things that's like, no, that doesn't mean I don't love you.
Love equals acceptance. Well, not necessarily.
No, that's not true. I don't have to accept everything about you to love you.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I worked in retail, so half the dudes I worked with were gay.
Mm-hmm.
So, and they knew I was in ministry school, but I didn't get into anything with them. I was like, whatever, nicest guys, super nice.
Yeah.
Worked hard. I had no complaints at all. They dressed a little weird, were flamboyant, but they were funny. They were good like
Good workers.
good workers, fun to be
Yep.
around. And one of them was all like, somebody said something to them, and I was like, yeah, dude, I don't really agree with your lifestyle, but I don't really agree with getting drunk either. So, like, yeah, I don't think that's how Jesus wants you to live, but there's tons of stuff that I don't think is okay.
Right.
But it doesn't mean I don't like you or
Right.
think you're awesome.
Yeah. Exactly. That you have value.
Yeah, you're amazing. Like, I think
Yeah.
you're great. Would I? So, another great example of love, right?
Right.
I don't have a place in his life to be like going after that. It would actually break connection.
Right.
I said what I believe. I said I don't think Jesus actually likes that. I don't really like that, but it's not loving for me then to go like, yeah, you're a sinner, and he's not saved. He doesn't know Jesus.
Exactly.
That's a boundary that I'm not going to cross and violate.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to be like, yeah, I think you're amazing. I think Jesus loves you. He doesn't agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
But that's basically all I'm going to say, because there's those tons of stuff I don't agree with every day.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, we can go through the church and just look at all the different things that we do as a church, and we say to ourselves, okay, wait a minute here. Some of this stuff doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
It actually hurts relationship. It hurts,
Right.
What a healthy boundary actually looks
Right.
like. The way I perceive boundaries is you want to, you use the analogy of a fence and then with a gate.
Yeah.
The goal of that is to invite them into a healthy relationship.
Yes.
That's a goal of a healthy boundary.
Right.
Not to keep people out, not
Yep.
to put, so I'm actually going to say this, but make sure you hear me out till the very end. Like, I'm against abortion, of course.
Yes.
I don't think it's not God's will. It's all those different things. But to be honest with you, I'm not a huge fan of people who picket it. I feel that actually causes an unhealthy boundary to say you're this, I'm this. I mean, if we just put it this way, if we stood there and said, hey, before you do an abortion, come talk to me,
Mm-hmm.
or have a sign or something like that, it says, I think we'd have a better response
Mm-hmm.
to that whole thought process. So it's almost like that whole gate or wall that people build, and they put signs. If you had abortion, we'll keep you out.
So you're not against picketing it. You're against how you.
Yes.
You're basically not against protesting it. You're against how people go about
Yes,
it.
because it's basically it's keeping people out
Yeah.
instead of inviting them into a healthy relationship with the Lord.
Yeah.
And with each other.
Yeah.
I just feel like it doesn't really have the response that we really want it to,
Mm-hmm.
because it's infiltrated the church. This is how we do things,
Mm.
and it's I believe it's twisted. So make sure you understand that. It's just my own thought process on that. So
Strategy.
yeah, a little
A little bit more strategy
Yeah.
to it.
yeah. So, but anyways, getting back onto the boundaries.
That's a whole rabbit trail, because I have like 10 videos in my head right now.
yeah.
Anyway.
Well, I pass it all the time on one of the main streets in town. And
Oh, I see.
I see the pickets, and I'm like, you wonder how much of an effect
Right.
does it have. I'm sure there's a few
Yeah.
people that have turned and gone the other way,
Yeah.
and then it's great. And I'm not necessarily trying to say like bash those people. I'm trying to say this like, maybe we need to rethink this.
Right. Like the whole louder with Crowder approach,
Yeah. So,
which actually has a lot of fruit.
what's that?
Actually has a lot of good fruit. Actually, like
Yeah.
those are really popular segments of his show.
Oh, really?
Like he just sits at a table and has a sign, whatever. So like for this example, abortion is murder. Changed my mind, and then people would come and debate him,
Right.
and he would have these facts. Whatever.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I've seen some of the memes too.
Yeah.
That have been changed for different purposes.
Right, yes, yes.
Different things.
SpongeBob is a terrible show. Changed my mind. I'm just kidding. I've never actually watched it.
Yeah, I actually don't mind SpongeBob too much, but
My wife loves SpongeBob, and so does my sister-in-law, and they'll like say all these things, and I'm like, I don't understand. I don't get what you're saying. Anyway, we digress.
Yes.
But just having that strategy to
Yeah.
have boundaries are strategic
Yes, absolutely.
for the purpose of love.
That's actually a good subject. I think we kind of hit there.
Yes.
There is a strategy to boundaries.
You can't just put up all of these things because like because you feel safe.
Right.
Like you actually have to have strategy to it.
Right.
There's like you said, if you're putting up all of these things, you're actually ending up putting up a prison,
Mm-hmm.
and you're isolated. You're stuck
Right.
in isolation, and so we need to be strategic about what boundaries are we setting. How, and you know what? For the most part, you don't even have to tell people what a boundary is,
Yeah.
and that's where it gets weird.
Mm-hmm.
And people just learning about boundaries, and then they're like, "Well, I need to talk to you about this boundary that I'm making," and blah, blah, blah. It's like you don't actually need to tell anybody what that is.
Yeah,
You
stop
could just-
throwing the word around.
you could just
I
say-
hate it. Don't throw the word around.
Yes.
I'm putting up this boundary with you. Instead of saying that, saying, I don't necessarily like the way this relationship is going.
Right.
How about we do it this way?
Yes.
You just set up a boundary without telling them it's a boundary, and then everybody freaks out and wants to put machine guns on the wall.
Because it's like when you say I'm putting up a boundary, you're automatically putting the other person on the defense,
Yes.
and it feels like they're the enemy.
Right.
When it's like, okay, this is weird. Like I thought we were just all right, fine then.
Yes.
Um,
Strategies.
yeah. So strategy has a lot to do with, well, life in general. But to do this well, and like, it's like Christian dating, man. Like,
Yeah.
you don't go up
But
to
I
the
don't have to do that.
you don't go up to the girl and say, "The Lord told me you're my wife."
Really, people do that? I've
Yeah.
never witnessed that, but
Yeah, people do that. I'm like, even if the Lord did, which I doubt, I have questions. Like, you don't say that. You don't lead with that. You ask the girl out, and then later on, maybe not even at all until you're married.
yeah. When you said that, immediately I pictured her putting up a crap ton of boundaries.
That's exactly what happens.
Because
Because
these
it's
walls.
scary.
Yeah.
Because actually what that statement is doing is you're trying to skip a bunch of boundaries.
Right.
You're trying to skip ahead with the God card. Strategy, okay?
Wow.
Strategy. So where were we going with
I
that?
don't even remember. We were talking about strategies, but
Before that, we were talking about how we need to define love and we need to define boundaries, because love does have boundaries, and the world does not like to have boundaries. And the world's definition, so our definition of love is a little bit closer to the true definition of love, Christian definition of love. A little bit better, not much better.
not much better.
But the world's definition of love right now is completely and utterly just trash.
Right.
It's so far gone. Like, accept everyone for who they are.
Yeah.
Affirm who they are today.
Yeah.
And if you don't accept me, then you don't love me. If you don't agree, agreement does not equal love. Because you and I will disagree on things, which is actually pretty rare in our friendship.
Kinda.
Pretty rare.
Pretty rare.
But Pastor Eric and I will disagree on things, and that does not affect our affection towards each other.
No.
It's like, oh, cool, like,
Yeah.
yeah, you disagree, and like a lot of times, right now in the world, there's a lot of this like black and white, and we're all like predisposed to this idea that we know the truth on all of these subjects and we know the outcome. And it's like, actually we don't know the outcome of all of this stuff that's going on right now.
No.
We really don't. I mean, actually, except for certain things, like transgender stuff, all of these. There's scientific facts that are just like those are facts. You can't be wrong about that.
Yes.
But like a lot of the stuff is like really not that big. Like we're making a lot of bridges have been burned, and in 10 years they're not going to matter that much.
Yeah, it makes you wonder if us as a church, and this would probably touch on the religious aspect of it, but have we as a church, using that abortion thing that we were talking about just a little bit ago as an example, have we created boundaries and we've kept the world out? We've actually kept the world out from experiencing what we get to experience, the love of Christ. Have we actually put up all these boundaries and said, "Oh no, you're not allowed. You're not allowed," and so people bounce from church to church, and eventually they become disenfranchised.
Yeah.
And they're just done. And they're just done, and they accept a lesser version or a weakened version or even not even a real form of love.
Yeah, I would say that's throughout church history actually that the church has tried. And I think a lot of times the heart is holiness.
Right.
It's good intentions. A lot of times there is just lack of security. There's fear, ego.
Right.
Like they're wanting a certain outcome and they're wanting results
Right.
now instead of believing God. But like even going back to like the Wesley brothers and all them in England, like they would bring the riffraff off the street into church.
Right.
And they were mad about it. So they kicked them out. So then they had to preach outside.
Right.
And then they'd have all of these people show up, huge crowds, and the church got mad because then less people were going into the church.
Right.
So then they outlawed preaching outside in England.
Really?
They did. This is what's...
See, I did not know that.
Yeah,
Okay,
so...
that's interesting.
Nothing is new. Nothing about what we're experiencing is new. So I always really encourage people just to like find history books, read them, because then I have so much assurance that the world is going to be okay, because I've read enough stories, I've read enough history. There's nothing new. In the 1600s, the King of England, total crackpot, was homosexual, had sexual relationships with men, with boys, all of this stuff. And this was when like Puritans and Protestant and Catholics were like all having big wars and all fighting each other. And so like, we're like, oh, the leadership's never been this bad in this country and blah, blah. It's like, guys, listen, there's been all kinds of bad.
Oh yeah.
All kinds of bad. And England made it out of that. So God has a plan. It's going to be okay. I don't believe it's like the end of the world. The world has been a lot worse.
Yes.
Honestly, it hasn't changed that much.
No.
But so where is it going with that? Man, we're going on all these rabbit trails today. So, being like about church boundaries, and then so the other history one was the Jesus People movement, and so they're all the church people were upset about their carpet.
Yeah.
Being.
Did you see the movie?
I didn't. I just know
Jesus Revolution. Go see it while it's still in theaters. Otherwise, buy the movie. Trust me, it's good.
I just know the story, and they were upset about the church carpet.
Yeah.
And that these hippie, non-shoe wearing people are gonna ruin their church. And the pastor was like, "We actually have souls coming to the Lord, and you're worried about the carpet."
Yeah, and the very next week in the movie, I don't know if I think that's true. I'm not sure, but what does he do? That very week he washes all their feet.
Yes.
Yeah. So I don't know if that's true or if that's just part of.
I think that is true.
Yeah.
I think that is true.
Yeah, but it was a really cool aspect of it.
Yeah. So I think that's very true. Like I think I said it last week. I mean the church, in my opinion, created cancel culture.
I totally agree.
I think that's been around in church history for way longer than the world is practicing it.
They just put a name to it finally.
Yeah, they just, yeah. I mean, how many churches, viewers, how many churches have we decided, oh, yeah, you're bad. We're not going to listen to you. You're cut off.
I don't like what you have to say, so.
Yeah, you're
you
done.
know.
I don't even think you know Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to listen to your music. I'm not going to buy your books. I'm not going to listen to your sermons. And if somebody goes to your church, I'm not going to talk to them. I'm like, wow. Unhealthy boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
So that's 100% true that the church, in a lot of ways, in an attempt to be pure and holy,
Mm-hmm.
because you then need to define what pure and holy is,
Mm-hmm.
have made these boundaries out of fear of contamination.
Right. Which, when you look at religion,
Yes.
that is the attempt to do it on our own.
Yep.
Instead of
Through Jesus.
through Jesus.
Right. And so you act like this whole self-love thing, again, we actually need to be going to the source. We need to be, if we really love ourselves, we should be eating of the Lord.
Right.
We should be focusing our life around the Lord.
Right.
That's the kingdom definition of self-love, is that you are going to the Lord for what you need. You are cutting your life to that template of those things that the Lord says you need to do these things. And for the most part, we don't do that.
Right.
We are cultural Christians. We are not disciples of Jesus.
That's a good word right there.
Then we substitute it. Oh, C.S. Lewis, he says something so beautiful, and I hope I'm getting it right. But Christianity is supposed to be about following a person, not following a set of principles, because you can look at a list of principles and you can then say, oh, well, I'm not quite measuring up, but I'm pretty close. But when you're following a person, you can't do that.
Yeah.
And so what happens is, instead of being in a relationship with Jesus, we, as cultural Christians, create our own principles. It's so similar to what happens with the Israelites and with Jews. Like the prophets, at the end of the prophets, there's a 400-year of silence because they're just not listening. The Lord's like, all right, I'm done.
Yeah.
I'm done talking. Yeah. You're all not listening, so what's the point?
Figure it out.
And in that 400 years, they add like hundreds of laws. I think it's 613 laws.
Something like that, yeah.
To the laws that God gave them. And so they tried to manufacture their holiness, their righteousness, through adding all of these rules. And so it's a dumbed down version. It is a diminished version of the actual thing.
It sounds like our society today.
Exactly.
In our legislation, and let's just create another law on top of another law
Yes.
on top of another. Nothing new under the sun.
Right. Nothing is new. What we're trying to do is we're trying to make laws to make people moral.
Right.
But you can't legislate people into moral living.
Right.
So, and the founders knew that. This experiment, this great thing that has come together through they acknowledged through God, like this happened because of God. They did, like, everyone was amazed that they won. Okay, like riffraff of Americans beat an entire empire.
Bunch of farmers.
And so they're like, this won't work unless people know the Lord and they have morals.
Right.
So when we decide to go off the source, we're like, we can do it on our own. We're going to make end up making all of these laws to try and make it work for us. So then we have to make these boundaries, these really hard, big boundaries and big walls saying, oh, you're not welcome here, you're not welcome here, oh, you believe this. And so then what happens, and it's like a story as old as time, you get more and more and more religious. And really what that means is you get more and more and more isolated. You've built a fortress where now you are the only person in there.
Yeah.
And then you're safe now. But at the end of the day, you're still not any more holy.
And you're alone.
And you're alone. It's a very lonely existence.
Very.
So, like, defining these terms is actually very important. Even holiness and purity, which is probably a completely different subject that we cannot touch on today.
No.
So we as Christians need to be careful that we're not making boundaries in order to keep people out.
Right.
We need to make boundaries in order to invite people in.
Right.
Every kind of boundary that is being made is for the purpose that my capacity to love can continue and endure and even grow my capacity to love. So, like, I think a good example is like when you get married, your capacity to love has to grow. And marriage is like not this like fluffy thing all of the time. And you actually
think it is, don't get married.
Yeah, don't get married if that's the truth. A relationship is an amplifier.
Yes.
So if your life is terrible and you think getting married is going to fix it, it's not. It's going to amplify how terrible it is. So if you're like trying to fix your life through marriage, that's really not going to work out. So marriage is an amplifier, and so your capacity to grow love is going to be challenged. It's going to be a challenge. It's actually going to be painful.
Right.
And you're going to have to die a lot of times. A lot of things are going to have to come off.
Very much every day.
Every day. Does that mean that you don't have boundaries?
No.
No, that actually means that person you invited very close into your life. They're going to cut a bunch of stuff out that shouldn't be there. What the problem is a lot of times in marriage is then that person tries to preserve themselves how they were.
Right.
And it's like how you was isn't good.
Well, and that's a lot of. I mean, you're talking about marriage, but really in all relationships, what happens is a lot of times we use boundaries to control.
Yes.
The other person.
Right.
So the first question in a person's mind needs to be, am I inviting them into freedom?
Right.
And in a healthy relationship, or am I actually creating these boundaries? I think last week I used the word amaze to direct them into the way you want them to go.
Yes. Manipulate them into how you want them to behave and how you want them to look.
Absolutely.
It's extremely destructive. And very similar to religion.
Yes.
And so it's control and self-preservation.
Right.
So boundaries isn't necessarily about preserving everything about your life, like everything about you. Boundaries are strategically placed in areas in order that you can continue to love.
Yes.
And so in that process, you're going to find out there's things in your life that can't stay anymore. Let's go, okay, easy one. All right, video games taking too much of my time. And I'm getting, just an example. I don't actually spend that much time. But it's taking away time, and it's taking energy away, and it's changing my attitude toward, my family. It's, oh, you guys are getting in the way of my video game time or whatever, It's like, okay, that's probably going to have to go, or at least going to go way down on the scale of importance, right?
Right.
So then you'd have to set a boundary for that aspect of your life. It's like, oh, I really love sports, and I just can't miss a game, So I you know,
I can't make it to church on
I
Sunday.
can't make it to church on Sunday, and blah blah blah, or my wife needs to be making all this stuff for the game, and my kids need to shut up and let me watch the show, and you know, I get to yell at the TV and all this stuff, right? It's like whoa. You're creating boundaries around this, but not around what you love, what you're called to love. You're not called to love football.
Right.
You're not called to lead football. You have no say in the Green Bay Packers. You know, I'm sorry. I'm gonna go on.
Yeah,
this. I'm gonna go on
ahead
this
because
there's a whole ESPN segment about experts on football.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That people want to listen to these dudes, and I'm like, you don't even know if this is gonna happen.
Right.
And they're paid experts. I'm like, this is a made up thing.
It's almost like a meteorologist for football.
Yeah, I'm like, this is.
I'm gonna predict the weather and get it right.
This is so fake. Like, you guys get paid for this, a lot of money.
Yeah.
You know, you're wearing really nice suits and all that. I'm like, this is crazy.
Armani suits.
I'm like, this is so dumb.
Yes.
Anyway, so.
And to be honest with you, there was a period of my life that's how I was like.
Right.
Like, my day revolved around football.
Right.
And that was something I actually had to cut out of my life.
Right.
For the people I loved.
Yes. And so because you're like, oh, this is actually hindering my capacity to love, I need to make new boundaries. Right. Not the other way around.
Yes.
So like I'm not going to make more boundaries with my friends or family because I need more video game time.
Right.
Right?
Self-preservation.
Self-preservation. And like, okay.
We talked about it last week, self-love.
Self-love, right?
You do need time.
You do need time. You do need to have some hobbies. And I do play some video games every once in a while. Mm-hmm. It's actually very helpful for my soul. Like, there's just times where it's like, dude, I cannot.
I need to unplug for an hour.
I just need to blow something up and nobody comes to me with their stuff. Like, I'm just gonna do this for a little bit. And if you communicate about that with the people you love, they'll be like, okay, I understand. I'll give you 30 minutes, an hour. Okay. Like, get it. I'll take care of the kids or whatever, you know, like you can do that. And that's actually how you do boundaries.
Right.
It's not like now they are outside of your boundary implications. They are supposed to help you with them.
They're also part of the decision.
They're part of the process of you making these. And so in a healthy relationship, they'll want to abide by them and help you get there. Mm-hmm. So it's not a lot of times boundaries. We make boundaries and self-love this like one-man team sport, right? And it's really not. Especially if you are everybody's in a relationship.
Right.
So if you have any friends, if you have any family, if you have a wife, if you have kids, if you have a pastor, if you have anybody in your life, you're actually going to be like, hey, I'm actually really struggling with this part of my life. I need help in implementing this. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to create actually a healthy ecosystem here, and I need to create some boundaries and some lines here because I'm failing. But if you try to do it by yourself and you don't actually let people in on that process, if I don't let my wife in on how I'm thinking about this, then she will unintentionally make herself an enemy of that boundary. And so then now conflict happens because I didn't communicate what my goal was and what my idea was, and I didn't tell her where the gates are or the implications of these new boundaries. And so now I'm at war with her because she's at war with what I'm wanting to do.
Right. Exactly.
So it's not like this self-love game, this self-love boundaries are ever going to be like, you can't just implement them by yourself and be like, this is what's going to happen.
Right.
That's not how life works. But a lot of times that's how people implement boundaries, is that they come to the table and they say, hey, I don't like this. This is how it's going to go.
Right.
That's not relationship.
No,
that's ultimatums. That's dictatorship. And so right there, you cut off relationship. Instead of instead of creating a gate, you just cut that rope.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting too. You know, just look at my own life. The more boundaries I put up, healthy boundaries,
Yeah.
the more my fence needs to be expanded.
Yeah.
So when I put up a healthy boundary, what happens is I'm actually inviting more and more healthy people into relationship
Right.
or into covenant with me.
Yep.
And in that process, I need to actually expand
Yes.
those fences or gates or whatever you
Yeah.
want to call it to allow room for them
Yeah.
in that area.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, another a great example is family, right? You get married.
Yep.
You love this woman, you love this man.
Mm-hmm.
You're getting stuff hit off you. You're if you're healthy,
Right.
you're like, oh, I can't live like that anymore. I can't speak that way anymore.
Right.
Oh, I can't actually make those jokes anymore.
No.
I mean, men have to go through that.
Yep.
Oh, that's not funny? Oh, okay. It was a joke, babe. It was a joke.
And I don't know why I'm blushing right now.
You know, and so then your love expands, and then you have children, right? Mm-hmm. And a lot of people think, oh, like how can you love that many people? And your love just expands. Like there's no way to really describe. Like it's not like you love one of your sons more than the other.
No.
You love them differently because they're different people, but
Right.
your love is expanding.
Right.
And so that's actually the goal of boundaries, is that we expand our capacity to love people. And so you're right, our fences should be getting bigger.
Right.
And our ability to protect those relationships. See, this is the benefit of boundaries. The benefit of boundaries, in my opinion, there's only benefit to boundaries.
Absolutely.
People who
To healthy boundaries.
To healthy boundaries. People who say that, boundaries have negative consequences have a skewed view of what boundaries are. They're not healthy boundaries.
Right.
But healthy boundaries, I actually get to do. If you're inside my fence, I'm now signed up to be on your team. I'm going to protect you. I'm going to be there for you. I'm going to fight for you.
Right.
And so you're actually under the protection of that covenant with me.
Right. And as they're inside those boundaries too, imagine a fenced-in yard and I invite people in. They help you remove the unhealthy aspects of that.
Yeah.
Inside that boundary.
Right.
They actually are beneficial to you growing.
Right. It's like if you created a community, like in real life, you had like 100 acres.
Like the village.
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding.
Like just like the village, Dan. Just like the village.
No, the ones we
do not speak of.
The red is not allowed.
We don't talk about those ones. Such a interesting movie.
Very interesting movie.
Yeah,
that's a shout out to Dan. Right,
it was a pleasant surprise. I wasn't sure what to think of it, because I've heard of it like growing up, like the village, and then I watched it. I was like, oh, it's actually pretty cool. Anyway.
Yeah.
But it's very much like taking care of that 100 acres. You try to do that by yourself, you're gonna have so much work all of the time, forever.
Never ceasing. Yep.
Never ceasing. So you get one more person. Okay, you do this really well. Can you manage the forest? Can you deal with that?
Yep.
It's like, all right, we also need to be worried about food. So all right, can you manage the garden? Right. You're actually creating an ecosystem to where you are managing life and prospering.
Right.
So people are always a blessing when you're inviting them into a healthy relationship, and they're accepting that healthy relationship, and they know the boundaries, they know the rules.
Right.
So you're actually expanding your capacity within those limits to produce more. And so there's an idea going on in the world that people are just a burden, and they just eat up resources, and there's nothing further from the truth.
Right.
There's nothing further from the truth. Actually, I mean, people are a good idea, hence why God created them.
Right. I would actually say that people are the resource.
Yes. No, exactly. Yes.
It's not money. It's not your house, your job. None of that matters. It's the your resources are people, connection, relationships. That's actually
100%.
that's how you grow all those other areas.
And if you look at world economic systems, growing population means you're going to have a healthy economy.
Right.
Depleting populations means your economy is going bad.
Right.
So it's actually in complete opposition of this idea that, oh, there's too many people, they're eating up the resources, the planet's going to end because of overpopulation.
Right.
That's a myth. FYI, look it up, do some digging. I'm a nerd, so there you go. I did it for you. You can believe me. You don't have to, because there's actual information.
Right.
So, like, to invite the goal of boundaries is to then you're basically creating a tribe of people that you're going to have interconnected covenant with and be able to expand capacity and growth and prosperity.
Right.
That's the actual goal of boundaries, is to expand your love, expand your capacity, expand your resources, in order that more people can enter into love. That's the kingdom, really. And the kingdom does have boundaries.
Absolutely.
The kingdom has boundaries. Demons can't come into the kingdom. Like, the enemy doesn't get to come into the kingdom.
Nope.
And all of their friends don't get to come in. Sexual immorality, all of those things that are listed. Sin doesn't get in.
I think that's interesting because I was just thinking about that because I feel like there'd be people that would be asking, well, how does that apply if I'm in an abusive relationship?
Right. Yeah.
You know, do I set up a boundary? What does that look like?
Yeah.
And I don't know. What do you think about that?
Well, if you're in an abusive relationship, I would ask what type of abuse. For one, I would get help right away, whether that abuser liked it or not. And if they're physically abusive, I would leave.
Yep.
Leave that situation. Not that you are saying that you're divorcing them or anything like that. You obviously loved them for a reason. But physical abuse and even emotional abuse is very destructive.
And they actually done studies that emotional abuse is the most destructive of all the abuses.
Right. Because it's forming your mind.
Right.
It's forming your inner being. And so I would say that you need to remove yourself from that situation in order that you can continue your capacity to have loving relationships, because it's forming you into a victim permanently.
Right.
Because you will not be able to think clearly, you will not be able to act clearly, because you are being formed by an abusive situation.
Right.
So my advice would be to remove yourself, not in order that you are, not that the motivation is that you cut that person off and that you never see them again. The goal of that is that you are healthy so that they would then move toward health.
Right.
If they decide not to do that, if they decide to keep going and that whatever, and they're still, then you have to, in order for you to have the capacity to love, have the capacity to be in walking with the Lord, then if they're deciding, I'm still going to do what I'm going to do, unfortunately, what they're saying is they're not going to live by those healthy boundaries, live by natural healthy boundaries that are innately in all of us, that God created on purpose. Then they are not a safe person, and that's why you have gates.
Right.
Some people don't get in.
Right.
And it's a really unfortunate reality that there's people out there that would choose to not live in health.
Exactly.
And we have sympathy for the victim of the abuse, but we also, in reality, do have sympathy for the abuser, because abusive people have been abused. So
most likely, yes.
Like,
High percentage.
it's not like, oh, they're just evil people and they need to, we need to kill them or whatever, like certain points, right? There's a reason why there's a death penalty. Like,
Right.
you don't just get to go around murdering people.
Right.
That's not what life
Right.
is, right? You have partnered with evil.
Yeah.
There's a big difference between like crime and partnering with evil. So that's a totally different subject. But unfortunately, some people just choose not to move towards health.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think the common misconception is okay, I need to put up this boundary to protect myself from, let's say, an abuse. But the reality is if you put up a healthy boundary, typically an unhealthy person, if they choose not to, will avoid healthy boundaries.
Yes.
They will actually avoid you instead of you keeping them out.
Yeah.
If it's done in the correct manner.
Right. And people actually don't like boundaries. People who
No.
most people hate boundaries because most people are users.
Yes.
So you just made it impossible to be used. So they're going to be upset with you. So FYI, that will happen to you.
Yep.
Multiple times throughout your life, probably daily.
Yes, it happens quite often.
I mean, you run a business and you have boundaries at your business.
Absolutely.
So people get mad about that. It's like, oh, you're not going to fix my problem? No. Right? Like,
Right.
It's like, no, that's not what we do here.
No, exactly.
So, but yeah, so unfortunately, some people will just not want to move into health. And that's part of reality, is that we can't control people and we can't make other people's decision for them. And we, as much as I would love that people would choose the right way when I present it to them, they don't.
No.
A lot of times they don't.
No, they don't.
And that doesn't change the fact that I love them. It actually grieves me when they decide to not move towards health. It's like, oh man, that's going to be a big mess for you. Mm-hmm. That really grieves me. Mm-hmm. Like that's a burden.
Right.
Oftentimes it's like, oh, so that doesn't mean that you love them less.
Yeah.
That actually means, okay, well, I can't help you. Mm-hmm. If you're deciding to go that way, I can't help you.
Yeah. It kind of almost brings up that whole idea of the prodigal son and the son being away and in his unhealthiness.
Yeah.
And I will go back to my father's house where he knew there was love and there was
right.
There was health.
Right.
It's that whole, having a healthy boundary in, like we discussed,
yes,
invites people in.
Right.
But only to a healthy relationship.
Right. Only to a healthy relationship.
Right.
And that's the goal, right? And so like when we allow unhealthiness to continue in our ecosystem, it inevitably affects that ecosystem.
Right.
So you're actually not practicing self-love.
Right.
And you're not actually practicing boundaries well. Mm-hmm. You're letting the wolves in.
Right.
And your resources are being eaten up. Your sheep are getting devoured. Right.
And one thing I wanted to bring up today, and I actually wrote it down, but I think the number one thing, like I've had to say like a list of a healthy boundary, because I think people have their own idea of what healthy looks like.
Yeah.
And I think for most people, they need to understand that a healthy boundary only comes out of a grounded identity in Christ.
Yes.
It only comes, if you don't know who you are, you will always come out of unhealthiness. And even though you think you're creating a healthy boundary, you're actually creating what we talked about with the world's boundaries.
Yeah.
It's a totally different perspective because you really don't know who you are. You don't know the word.
No.
And you don't really know Jesus if you're not grounded in that.
Right. You're not actually going to that table first.
Right.
You're not actually eating of the Lord. You're not feasting in the ways that He's provided.
Right.
And so you're still trying to do it your own way.
Right, right.
You're still trying to, make all of these rules, all of these things in order that your life looks like holiness and looks like righteousness, but it's not under the blood.
No, it's our perspective.
Yeah.
Of what we think. I mean,
Yeah.
I think it's A.W. Tozer, but I'm 100% sure. He was talking about. I read once where he was talking about truth, and truth we will always fall short of what we think truth is until we understand that truth was a person.
Yeah.
And so we can think it's truth, but unless we actually run it through the whole gamut of what are you saying here, Jesus?
Yeah.
We will fall short of healthy boundaries, good relationships, whatever you want to throw in there.
It's actually very similar to what C.S. Lewis said.
Yes.
But the principles are following a person.
Yes, exactly. And that's the reality of it.
Yeah.
And a lot of people have that misunderstanding. So.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So interesting.
Yeah. I'm going to show y'all the book that you should read on boundaries so that you don't have the wrong idea what that means. It's called Boundaries. Very, very on point. By Dr. Henry Cloud and Dr. John Townsend. And they're Christians. It's packed full of scriptures and references to what healthy boundaries means. Mm-hmm. And so, like, one of the points is, like, if you're doing something out of obligation and you feel like you have to do it, it's not a pleasing gift to the Lord.
Interesting.
So, like, offering or whatever.
Right.
Like, bring a joyful gift to the Lord. Right? If you're feeling obligated, if you're like, oh, I have to do this. So the biblical principle is if you're doing that with people, it's not really good.
No. And people will notice.
And people notice.
Interesting.
Anyway, so there's tons of great information in here. It will challenge you. It'll be like, wow, I didn't know that scripture could mean that, but like I didn't realize that's what it was about. So highly recommend it. Highly recommend delving into this subject for yourself and exploring that. And so self-love for us as Christians is going to the Lord, eating of the Lord, being defined by the Lord. It doesn't mean we don't have hobbies. Doesn't mean we don't pursue passions and stuff. God put those there on purpose. You never know actually what God can do through your your hobbies. You have no idea.
Yeah, it's interesting when you ever listen to Sean Boltz and all of a sudden he gets a word playing Call of Duty. And it's like, what?
Yeah.
No way. That's cool.
They open doors that other people may not be able to go through. Mm-hmm. One guy, Jason Valentin, he loves fishing. He just loves fishing. So he fishes a lot. He's a really good fisherman. And, he'll be going to different places and having conversations. And then it comes out that he's a fisherman and then connects with this person super, super well. Nobody else understands what's going on. But that opened a total different door into that person's life that now they have a connection that he can now speak into different areas because of that one common thing.
Commonality. Yeah.
So don't dismiss those things and don't hear us saying that you have to cut out things that you're passionate about.
Yes.
But you need to prioritize the important things that the Lord says, this is how you get fed. This is actually how you get loved. These are the important things. Everything else is added to that, not the other way around.
Right.
And for the most part, that's what we have done in our cultural Christianity is that, I'm a plumber first, and I go to church, right? It's like, no. You're a Christian. You follow Jesus. You happen to be a plumber.
Right.
There's a big difference in that mentality.
Was that John G. Lake or Smith Wigglesworth that was a plumber? I think it was Smith.
It was Smith Wigglesworth.
Yeah, 50 years old plumber.
Yeah.
It still
Yeah.
blows my mind.
Right. Well, John G. Lake was a businessman.
Yeah.
He was a very successful
Yep,
business
that's
person.
right. Okay. Yep.
Yeah, and then God called him out of that, and he moved to South Africa.
Yeah.
He actually lived in Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Huh. Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I totally agree.
Yeah.
And on the common misconception too, as far as eating from the table of the Lord too, is that it happens just in prayer time, whether in the morning or in the evening.
Right.
This is, as a church, I think we're really moving towards this. Like, it's all day, every day.
Yes.
Communing with Him.
Yes.
It's not and it's a minute by minute, second by second thing.
Yeah.
That you can experience God and have a healthy lifestyle, have a healthy love for yourself.
Right. And that's where like the monastic living kind of where I like.
Yes.
That ever-present reality that you can
Yes.
commune with the Lord, whether you're doing dishes, whether you're, working on the garden, whether you're, whatever it is, doing laundry.
Brother Lawrence.
Yeah, Brother Lawrence. Highly recommend. And so, yeah, we need that reality that we can commune with the Lord. And that's actually how we are going to expand our capacity to love, expand our healthiness to do that, and strategically set boundaries around those things.
Right.
And so, before we were talking about when we put the first things first, when we put those things first, it amplifies our ability to love all these kinds of people that we're called to love.
Right.
Not the other way around. Like if I put my wife before Jesus, it's actually not going to allow me to love her the way I should love her. Mm-hmm. It's going to become a burden that I cannot bear.
Right.
But if I love Jesus, he's going to be my source. I'm going to be filled with his presence, with his love, with the identity he made me to be. Mm-hmm. And then through that, I'm able to love her the way that I'm called to love her.
Right.
And then I'll actually be pointing her to Jesus as her source as well.
Right. It's kind of like God's in the Holy of Holies. Your wife, your most intimate family members are on the inner courts.
Yeah.
And then, there is a progression. It makes perfect sense. I mean, you
Yes.
look at Jesus, John, the disciple that Jesus loved. Now, whether that's his perspective or not, whatever.
Yeah.
Then the 3 disciples, then the 12, then the 70.
Yep.
So let's, make sure you understand that the Holy of Holies is reserved for the Lord. And as you go in, you come out glowing.
Yep.
With the glory of the Lord, then you can give that.
Yeah.
You can give that away all day long.
Absolutely. And so then, you can strategically set boundaries with gates. With gates to invite people in.
Right.
The right people in. And you know what? Like, not everybody we're not called to everybody.
No.
We're not called to everybody. So it's okay. It's not unhealthy to be like, you're amazing. I'm amazing. Like dating relationships. I went out with some different people before I went out with Rachel, and it's like, you know what? You're amazing. I'm amazing.
That's just not it.
That's not it. Like, I'm not the one for you. You're not the one for me, but you're awesome.
Right.
You're cool. Yeah. Loved hanging out. But I don't have... Rachel tried to friend zone me, and I was like, I don't have time for another friend. And I like you, so that'd be weird.
Right.
That was a healthy boundary for me. So I couldn't be just friends with you. I have feelings for you. Uh-huh. And I don't have time for friends. So I have a bunch of friends already. I don't have time for that. I don't want that. So it actually invited her into a healthy definition of what we were going to go after. A deeper relationship of like, okay, if we actually call it dating, we're not in a dating relationship. We're going on dates. It's all safe. There's no strings attached. But if we call it that, it's way better than if we just were friends that had this weird thing. We're all going to get hurt. We're going to get weird. It's inevitable. Been down that road. But when you define what you're doing, it's in a safe place where you could say, you know what? I don't think it's going to go anywhere.
Right.
There you go, everybody.
Healthy boundaries.
Healthy boundaries. Strategically learn about it. Go after it with the Lord. find out, oh, I give no boundaries.
Or I give too many.
Or if I give too many. It's an exhausting thing. I see people who have no boundaries, and they say yes to too many things, and they're running ragged all over town, all over their life. They look exhausted. I'm like, you need to decide what your life is going to be about and just do that. Mm-hmm. You have too many options. I think that's what we talked about. Yep. We have too many options. We're trying to do too many things. Who are you called to be? Who are you going to be? Who is God saying you are? What is your source? Why are you saying yes to all of this stuff is my question. Right. Why do you feel the need to say yes to everything?
Right. And then also the aspect of unhealthy boundaries create prisons for you.
Yep.
Where you can tell the people that have unhealthy boundaries or too many boundaries.
Yeah.
And they are isolated, alone, in pain, they have no movement in the Lord at all because they have set up the wrong kind of boundary.
And their capacity is very similar to the one who's running around all over town.
Pretty much the same thing.
And they're running ragged, but they're doing all the running for themselves.
Exactly.
In this little prison. They're running circles about themselves.
Yes.
So both ways is exhausting.
Yes, absolutely.
So get to the table of the Lord. Actually, kingdom self-love is going to the table of the Lord. In the purpose of that is to know Jesus, just to know Jesus, and that you can expand your capacity to love and strategically set boundaries so that keeps happening, that your capacity to love expands. That is the definition of self-love and boundaries in the kingdom.
Exactly.
All right, thanks for tuning in, guys. Let us know what you think in the comments. If you would like us to delve deeper into this subject, I mean, I think we could. It's a pretty big one.
It's very big, actually.
We may continue. I don't know. We'll see what happens next week. But hit that notification bell. Subscribe. If you'd like to donate money to this ministry, we have a little link there. No obligation. But if it's a gift of love, do it. Only a gift of love. We don't want your obligation money. That's not of the Lord. So, thanks for tuning in. And I'll close this out in prayer. Thank you, Jesus, that you are about expansion and expanding our capacity and expanding our ability to love and expanding the kingdom. And I just pray that you teach us how to come to your table and actually experience what actual loving ourselves looks like, that we would be people who center our lives around you and your table and your definitions and the feast that you have brought us, and we would choose the right things, that things would fall away and we would make new boundaries in order for those things to stay enduring and our capacity to grow and love other people as well. And we would just invite people into healthy relationships, and we would be people who can realize what is not healthy and lovingly put a boundary there and say, hey, when you do this, this happens, and I want you to prosper. I want you to be able to be in a relationship in a healthy way. So just teach us about that. In Jesus' name, amen.